And we're live. So, everyone, welcome to the live stream this evening. We will be chatting building and leveraging networks. And joining us is networking expert Kelly Hoey, who also happens to be an author. And everyone knows I have a passion and I say compassion for authors. So the author Build Your Dream Network, Forging Powerful Relationships in a Hyper-Connected World. And she hosts the Build Your Dream Network podcast. So we have two things in common, Kelly.
We have a lot more, a passion for people getting their financial house in order and education. I know you were principal for a day today. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. It's so exciting. And I was able to integrate the financial literacy component and actually host the class. So that was amazing.
Oh, I can't start that too soon.
So Kelly was on my podcast, Milestones, Motivation, and Money, earlier this year. So Kelly, that was 5 months ago. It feels like a month or two.
Oh yeah, where's the time gone?
I know. So, and when I had you on the show, I was wrapping up season 1. Now I'm getting ready to wrap up season 2. Which is like so insane to me with this whole podcast. I started the podcast last year. It was just something where I was like, oh, maybe I'll do like 10, 20 episodes. And now I'm hitting episode 50. And I have over 70 episodes that are recorded. The rest will sort of launch with season 3 in January. So it's been an amazing ride. I've seen the podcast at the top of the charts in Uruguay. I've seen the podcast in the top 20 in the UK, recognized by the Daily Finance in the United Kingdom, Australia, Belize. I mean, so many listeners in various countries. When I look at the metrics, it's always amazing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was not expecting this. And I'm sure you've seen some of the same with your podcast.
Well, I think it's always one of those things. There's so much with the way the internet and social media in particular is these days that we can get really negative about it because there is this, very dark side to it. But then exactly what you're talking about, all of a sudden you're influencing people all around the world and providing insights that they obviously desperately need. And where would we have been able to do this before without technology and their internet? So kudos to you.
Thank you. And kudos to you because I joined a webinar that you were a part of with, I believe it was the Tory Burch Foundation, maybe in August, September-ish.
Yes. And they're just, if anyone, Tory Burch Foundation does programming for entrepreneurs. Obviously of particular interest to women entrepreneurs. That seems to be their target audience, but that doesn't mean the men can't pay attention too. But their applications are open for their fellowship program. So women entrepreneurs, go and take a look at that. It's the Tory Burch Foundation Fellows Program. It's a really amazing program.
Right. So I joined. I saw you post about it on LinkedIn and I joined and I was like, she's so amazing. I was listening and I was like, I wonder if she's going to get a list of everyone who's watching. She's going to know I'm watching.
I didn't get a list, so I'm glad to know someone was watching.
And I was like, oh, this is just such good information. I'm sure everyone on the call thought it was as well. Now, when you were on my podcast, we talked about how your network is your net worth. And I always tell everyone, you have to pay attention to how you're building your network, who's in your circle. I even brought that up today when I was principal for a day and talking to students and they were asking me for advice. And I was telling them about, building their networks at a young age and as they're getting ready to enter college. And I thought about you earlier and I was like, well, actually, I'm having a conversation on this tonight. Now, tell us why networking is so important and critical.
Well, depending on which survey you look at, 80% or more of jobs are found through networks. So as I mentioned before, the love of things digital and the internet. So many people they think it's so easy now. They can submit their application for jobs through an online portal, but your resumes are floating to the top of the pile. They're getting, sifted out from all of those other, thousands of applicants because of relationships and connections. So they're really critical. Relationships give you feedback. Relationships are, how you get yourself out of an echo chamber. They're how you get over having a pity party when, you've had a bad day. They're the things that kind of, right your ship. So there's so many things. And the other piece of importance of networks, in particular, is they're really good for our mental health and our well-being, and that is, in particular, something I think a lot of people have probably realized over the course of the past year, or longer now. God, is it still March 2020? I sort of think sometimes, but
I
you
know,
know,
right?
right? Like some of the casual introductions, the relationships that maybe it's people we didn't see all the time. I think what we've realized over the course of the past 20 months is those relationships add a lot of value to our lives. So there's all sorts of reason why networks, as opposed to just random schmoozing, and attending meet and greets for the sake of checking a box to say that you've done some networking. It's why networks are really important, and cultivating them in your day to day is that's an easy thing to do.
Yes, and so I've tried to drill this in to so many friends, so many colleagues, especially while we've been in this virtual world of you can still network. And you touched on tips on that on the podcast earlier this year. Let me ask you, have you seen anything that's changed in the past 5, 6 months as far as how people are networking or new ways? Because we're still sort of in this digital phase and people are working from home. And even for me, for my 9 to 5, like I haven't had social interaction since February of 2020. And like today, when I went to this event and went to a reception, I was like, this is the first event that I've been to that's in person since early last year. And it just dawned on me. I was like, wow, I cannot believe it's been this long.
Yeah, a lot of people said to me they found themselves, the first time they could go to the dentist, post sort of lockdown and pandemic, during the pandemic, they said they found themselves talking to the dental technician or the receptionist like for extended periods of time, like they hadn't in the past, because it was the first sort of interaction that they'd had. Um, I'm having some fun actually doing some interviews and some updates on my book. You and I were chatting before we came on air. Build Your Dream Network turns 5 next year, early in January 2022. And so putting together what will be a free downloadable supplement. And this is one of the questions I've been asking people, like sort of what has happened to their networking. And what I've seen, Angel, is like those who had built relationships beforehand have seen those really deepen, and they've been able to grow and expand based on the relationships they had before. Other people intuitively understanding the power in networking of listening and observing have also been able to build new relationships. So, for example, one of the interviews is with a woman by the name of Erin Cronican. Erin is the founder of the Seeing Place Theater here in New York City. And she's been attending a lot of online programming that's been put on for other, like, I want to say, similarly situated not-for-profits as hers. So the Seeing Place Theater is a social activist, social justice, nonprofit theater. And in the normal course of times, when they're putting on productions, they don't have time to network with others who are, I would say, kindred spirits. And so she's been attending these programs, and by watching and observing, on the various Zooms that she's on, who else is there, paying attention to the questions they're asking, she's been able to develop some really interesting connections, professional connections with other executive directors and founders of similar theaters. And that has been really helpful to have other people to kind of bounce ideas off us, off of, to brainstorm ideas with that she didn't have before. So that's one of the other things I sort of think, people are so, so fixated on a form of networking, like, what am I going to say? What's my icebreaker question going to be? Whereas some of these people I see who are really excelling with their networking right now are those who are watching and listening and observing, and then realizing that one Zoom, one conversation is just a single conversation. And what they can do instead is use that as sort of an entree to building a relationship or seeing if there is, further things to talk about. So there's a couple of things in terms of things I'm seeing right now that I think are they're going to hold these people in good stead in the long run with their network, and they're not just a stopgap measure.
Now, you said a few things I wanted to circle back on. So one, without having these in-person conversations, these connections, and we've been in this virtual world, times we just find ourselves blabbering. I found myself doing the same.
But I think what we're realizing, if there's, kind of like the silver lining to all of this that we're going through, is I think we as human beings realize that we need other human beings, and some of the human beings we need and that add value to our lives are these casual acquaintance relationships, not just the deep relationships that you have with your best friends or your spouse or your family, but some of these, like I said, these casual interactions, they add a lot of value to our lives. So I think that's, keep that in mind if you find yourself talking too much to the receptionist or the barista or the security guard or whoever it may be.
Now, I will say, so there was a landscaper in my neighborhood and they were working on my neighbor's house. And I was like, oh, people, because we never see our neighbors. It's like everyone's just in the house. And I went outside and I was just talking and chatting. But before I knew it, me and this guy were talking for 30 minutes. And I know nothing about landscaping. We're just having a conversation. And actually, he ended up gaining my business, which I'm sure he appreciated. But I was like, I don't know what it is. It's like we need that social interaction. And it's like, well, here's the thing. I consider myself 50% introvert, 50% extrovert. So what is it? Ambivert is what
you're an ambivert like me. Yep.
And sometimes, although, I can be cheery and jolly, and sometimes when I'm at a huge event pre-COVID, I would start to feel a bit drained just being around so many people. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to find a closet and hide or hide in the bathroom to regain my energy. But now it's almost like I'm getting energy from being around other people. And I find that so interesting, but it's like, I really need the social interaction. It's like we need it, but also opens up our eyes to different topics, not only in what we're an expertise in and just learning about other people and building that network, right?
Right. Well, and, thinking about this landscape dude, there's a smart, hey, how smart, right? He could have just said, oh, hi, hello, nice to meet you. By the way, I'm really busy and, here's my card. But instead, I think that example that you're giving of right now, a really good strategy for anyone is to really lean into conversations. When someone says, hey, how are you? Let's not throw out that usual non-listening sort of knee-jerk reaction, which is, oh, I'm fine, how are you, right? That kind of exchange, that kind of small talk exchange, I mean, we just kind of throw it out there. We're not listening, we're not paying attention, we're just doing it as, I don't know, just sort of a courtesy or habit, rather than when someone says, hey, how are you? Hey, why don't you pause? Why don't you say how you are? Why don't you say, you know what, today's not so bad. Better than some I've had recently. And then why not listen in and say, whoa, what's been happening that I've missed? Let's lean into those kind of conversations, because you never know what you're going to uncover. You never know how you're going to deepen and further a relationship. Or in the case of Landscape Dude, he got some work. Or you found a good landscaper for your yard. What's more win-win? What's more win-win than that?
I know, right? And you said something so important, like taking time to say something other than, hi, and engaging in conversation. And I think that's a huge part of building the networks as well. You think about, I know on the podcast we discussed conferences and how people would network, and most people would just hand out their business cards, but really just being engaged and learning more about the person. I personally feel like that's like the number one way to get people to remember who you are, especially if you're going to go back and try to connect with them on social media. I can say, remember, we had this conversation about XYZ, or but it opens the door to additional conversations. So, Kelly, I want to talk about more so leveraging the network. Once you've actually built the network and you have the people there, how can people take advantage of leveraging their network?
Well, I think this is, I think if you've built a network and if you've built it because you've been of service to your network and you have been there for them, you haven't built a network just on the basis of collecting business cards or um, you know, vanity social media metrics, just an accumulation of names or followers, but you actually have been there for other people. How and when you need it will reveal itself when you have that need. I mean, one of the stories in Build Your Dream Network is with Catherine Finney when she was crowdfunding. And I interviewed her, and someone might say, well, it's crowdfunding, Kelly. That's marketing. It's like, no, no, no. That's networking, because the successful crowdfunders tap their network first. And as Catherine said, she'd had, 15 plus years of sort of successful career, building her network from her various roles, various things that she had done to serve and be of service to her network, that when she came to crowdfunding, her network actually gave a big sigh of relief. They were like, finally, we can do something for you. And they, gave generously because it was a chance for them to finally give back to her. So that's one of those things where I would say, think about how you show up every day. Are you showing up and being of service to other people that, they'd actually be responsive and want to help you, right? Because you should do that before you think, oh, let me just start tapping my network. If you haven't been there for them, why are they going to show up for you? So first of all, kind of do that. And then when comes time to tap your network, this is where I'd say, think about, first of all, narrowing your ask. Lots of times people put out big, general asks, and that's hard for a network to get their head and grasp around to help you in a really productive way. And then think about, right, how can I be specific in my ask, and how can I be targeted to whom I ask? Because when you do that, you'll improve the chances of the results that you get. So first of all, you got to be, kind to your network and have built it so they want to respond to you. Then I think you should be really specific in what you ask for, and then be targeted in terms of who you ask. Not everyone in your network is capable of helping you. And I say that not because they don't want to, but timing is everything. If the person that you want to you think is going to be the most helpful, if you haven't checked in with them recently, or you haven't checked their social channels, you may not be aware that they're, homeschooling their kids again because their school district is shut down, or, they've had an emergency, or their company's in a big merger. They may be the ideal person in your mind to leverage and help you with a particular networking goal. But if their life is, I'm going to say a dustbin on fire, like, wrong timing. Go to the next person on your list to help you out, or hold off on making that ask so it doesn't get lost. Does that make sense, Angel?
It does. And thank you so much for sharing that. Now, you mentioned going in with the specific ask, and I think that is so important because on LinkedIn, think about how many messages you probably receive during the week, whereas some people do want to genuinely connect, but some people will send you a request and they don't say anything. And that is the most irritating thing to me. I'm like, okay, do you know me from somewhere? Have we met? Can you at least say hello? Can you say maybe
That's
you've enjoyed a post? Just say something. Or
yeah. Oh my God. I beat people over the head with my book on that one. And my reaction in those situations is just to hit delete because your most, I mean, you think of your most valuable assets in life. And in my books, your most valuable assets is your reputation, your relationships, and time. And time is non-renewable. The other two are renewable. The time is not renewable. And so when someone wastes my time that way, asking me to figure out why we should connect drives me crazy. Now, my friend Joyce Sullivan is nicer than I am in those situations. What Joyce does, she has a standard message that she responds to people when they do that. And she says, "Thank you for reaching out. Could you please tell me why you think we should connect?" And 9 times out of 10, no one responds. And then 1 time out of 10, someone does, and she says, "You know what? They actually give me a good reason." So, another alternative to hitting delete is to have a cut and paste message that you could send to all of those. And I think for if some people, if they were looking to expand their network, or depending on what they were promoting at that time, that might be a good thing. But yeah, those
you know what?
messages drive me nuts too.
I am over here cracking up because I actually used to do that. I would just send a message like, so do we know each other? Have we connected somewhere? Because what tends to happen for me on LinkedIn, I don't know if this has happened to you, but someone will send a request. With the request, they'll send a note, oh, looking forward to connecting. And as soon as you hit accept, they're hitting you with some sales pitch for insurance, financial services, or whatever they're marketing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, not another one of these.
Yeah,
Um,
I hesitate to connect because there's so many people are using that platform in that really kind of smarmy way.
Right. So Kelly, I want to move on to another topic as far as networking at a particular age. And I posted this on Facebook the other day, and I said, sadly, many people fail to realize and the understanding or the importance of your network until later in life. When I'm speaking to people who are in their 40s and 50s, of course, like it's almost as like people are hitting the ground running because they're thinking about retirement and oh my gosh, maybe I need a new job. But then they look around and they've never built a network. So they don't have the right people in their lives to help them take that next step or make that jump, or even someone to turn to and ask questions. And I've seen this with a few of my friends, I've seen this with family members. Do you think that it's ever too late to start building your network? And what advice would you give to those who are sort of at that age point? I don't want to say middle age, but I don't want to say that, but 40, 50 years old. And, now they're realizing the importance of networking. What steps can they take to build at this late in the game?
Well, first of all, they should take a big, deep breath. I'm hoping that for their professional lives and their personal lives and their community service lives, up to this point, they haven't been complete jerks. Someone said to me, "What's the secret to networking?" I'm like, "Don't be a jerk." So hopefully they have not. But this is where you're going to pause and say, right, how have I been as a colleague? How have I been as a friend? How have I been as someone in my community? How have I been as a collaborator, a volunteer, whatever? Because all of those are part of your network. I think there used to be a time, Angel, where we could say, we could really think of networking in that way, that we had to network up the food chain. It had to be someone more powerful who could help us find opportunities or find new business or change careers or pivot our life completely. Your opportunities can come from anywhere. So when you think about networking and who's in your network, who do you volunteer with and alongside? Who did you used to work with? Who did you mentor? All of that is part of your network. And so if you're someone in your 40s or 50s and you're thinking, oh dear, I'm going to make this career change, start thinking about, all right, who are these people? Now, you don't have to talk to them all the time. They don't have to be like the softball league or the bowling league or the weekly thing that you had done in the past or do all the time. But sort of think like, have I been there for other people? Because if you have, they will be there for you. I remember it was an event I was doing with my book up in Moncton, New Brunswick. I am Canadian, so it was kind of exciting doing a book event up there. And a gentleman came up to me, and he had lost his job, and he was in his early 40s. And he told me this story. He had been laid off after being at this company for 15 years. He told me, you know, when they came in and told him they were doing a restructuring, and so his job was being eliminated. And they said, you know what, you're amazing. Just take all the time you need to, you know, clean out your office and whatever. We're not like, you know, going to take security and haul you out. He says, no, it'll just be a minute. He walked into his office and he picked up, I love this part, he picked up his Rolodex. He still had an old school Rolodex with like all his contacts in. For those who don't know, that's like if you had LinkedIn in this little metal spirally thing that sat on your desk that you would flip through alphabetically and find cards. Anyway, so he went, he picked up this physical contact list, and he said, I got everything I need, and he left the company. And he looked at me, he said, Kelly, I knew if I had the relationships, I had everything. And so that story for anyone should illustrate the importance of making relationships a priority. You know, here's a guy who's, you know, got kids and a mortgage and all the rest of it, and he was unfazed on finding his next opportunity because he knew he had a network. But if you're thinking you don't have one, my guess is that you do. And start thinking about all the touch points that you've had over the course of your career in your community, whether that is volunteering, being, you know, the little league coach or the soccer coach for your kids, you know, mentoring, other, you know, kind of community service work, or whether it's with your church or other organization. What are the professional organizations you've been part of? Like, all of that is part of your network. And where are the ones that you should be, you know, returning to sort of say, hey, I wanted to touch base. This is what's happened to me, you know, and I could, you know, seek your advice or seek your guidance on, you know, whatever it may be.
Awesome. Now, I have a question that I don't know. I don't think we discussed this, but here's a situation that I've seen. Person A networks with person B only to get close to person C. How do you feel about that networking strategy? Or is that really a part of networking, and leveraging the network is to meet maybe the person at the top of the food chain?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, here's why I'm hesitating. It's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, I think it's more up to person A to kind of see, you know, maybe being the connector and introducing B to C would be helpful to both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, think for example, person B wants to work for person C. So they ask person A to say, hey, you know me, this company's got an opening. I've submitted my resume. Could you make an introduction to person C? Because I know if I just submit my resume online, it's going to get lost. You're person A, and you think to yourself, wow, yeah, this person's skill set is exactly in line. I can help my friend person C. I can help them hire a really great talent, and I can help them short circuit what could otherwise be a long and overdrawn interview process if I point out to them that person B, who I know, has applied for the job. What I wouldn't do necessarily in that type of situation is immediately connect B and C. One of the things I talk about in Build Your Dream Network is you always do the double opt-in. You know, you sort of say, hey, you know, hey, Angel, so-and-so wants to meet you. Can I make the introduction? Here's why they want to talk to you. yes or no. And you could say, oh, that sounds great. I'd love to meet them. Or you could say, you know what? This week really sucks. Please do not put them in my inbox this week. Could you wait until after, or I'm going into a really busy time in my business. Could you ping me on this after Thanksgiving? Like that's the kind of reason why I always say do a double opt-in. And, so I think person B in these situations, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just all how you go about doing it.
And that's so interesting. And I'm so glad that you said don't immediately connect them, because I've met people like that. And I feel like people like that, especially if they don't want to have that genuine connection with you, it's almost like you're using someone. But at the same time, I know we have to have these strategies to get to where we want to be and build our network. And so it's extremely interesting. And maybe, that can be a whole podcast episode.
I'd come back and have that conversation with you. I mean, like I'm thinking for like a situation that I got into where someone said to me they had a new job and they wanted to talk to me about it, and and they were excited about it, and could we schedule time? And I was like, I'd be delighted to hear about your new gig, and I'd be happy to do that. And their preference was to jump on a Zoom, and I'm like, okay, fine. The next thing I know, on the Zoom is the founder of the startup that this person had a new job with. What really was, they were trying to be a referral source to get other people on this startup platform. And it wasn't an update on the job. It was a sales pitch to try and get me to, buy this product or service. To say that the 30-minute call, was painful and did not go well for all concerned on various levels, is I felt that I was used. I felt badly for this startup founder. I don't know what he had been told, but as for the person who orchestrated that call, their reputation and their ability now to ask me for anything is probably zero. And I was really willing to do things for this person in the past, but I was like, yeah, no, your credibility. If you had said to me, I want to tell you about this. And part of the reason I want to tell you about it is I actually think you'd be good for their platform, but let me tell you about it first. And if during that call they'd said it would be really helpful to me if I could schedule another call with the founder of this startup and you could just hear them out, I probably would have been okay with that. But being kind of ambushed, being told one thing and something else, yeah, not cool. Not cool at all.
Right. And so you mentioned something else I wanted to touch on. So people who consider themselves connectors. I meet so many people who call themselves like this connector. And I always wonder, you're connecting people with who they need to know, but what are you doing for yourself? So what are your thoughts about connectors?
I think a lot of people, kind of slap that on themselves. I think there are a lot of people who really get off on making introductions. Like it's the dopamine hit that they need. Like an extrovert who like, oh, I need to be doing this kind of stuff. I have a lot of people who tell me they're connectors, and then they do things like dump people in my inbox without asking. So I'm skeptical. Typically, when someone says that they're a connector that way, if someone isn't thoughtful about it, if they are not asking before making a connection, I take it with a healthy dose of skepticism.
So do you feel as though maybe that's the strategy for that connector to expand their network? So they're meeting all of the people at the top of the food chain and they're sort of holding them to connect other people. Or could that possibly be a strategy? Because I come across so many people who say, oh, I can introduce you to this person, this person, this person. But when I look at the connector, they don't seem to be making any progress. And so I always question, what is the purpose? And then maybe they do have some sort of master plan that's going to come into fruition down the road.
Yeah, I usually don't know what the purpose is. Like I said, maybe it is just that a personality type. You know, there is. If people are runners, you'll know there's a thing like a runner's high from, you know, that sort of adrenaline that you get from long distance running and things like that. There's actually a helper's high as well, which is kind of a cool, good thing. There's a dopamine hit from helping other people. So when people wonder why someone may be a mentor, you know, being asked for advice, giving advice, seeing other people implement it, seeing them succeed, that's a lovely little cycle of, you know, a rush of good endorphins in our brain. So for some of these people who say they're connectors, maybe it's that same thing. Maybe every time they, you know, they make one of those connections, they're giving themselves that, you know, their brain's giving them their hand a high five and they're all excited about it. But it's purely for themselves. It's not thinking about, is this useful for these other people? So
Thank you so much, Kelly. So I know we're coming up on time, and I have some questions from my Facebook group. So
cool. Let's answer them. Let's answer them.
Oh, you know what? I'd like to do something really cool. So I added this new brand here, banner, Q&A. Q&A, right?
Let's flash it again. Flash it again. Flash it again. I love that Q&A banner.
So someone is asking, what are good networking questions to ask?
I am not a fan of like having your, you know, your list of questions, you know, in your pocket, like these icebreakers work in any situation. I think I saw one on BuzzFeed or something, 100 icebreakers for any situation. I'm like, oh, I think a better question is, you know, when you find yourself in that scenario, let's say an old school networking event, you know, like the one you were at today, Angel, right? Think about why you're in that room. Why did you make the choice to attend that networking event? You know, and that should be the lead off to the questions you ask that are contextual to that event. Oh, so, you know, you meet someone else in that room and you discover from their name tag that they also were one of the principals for a day. So you could sort of think, well, how was that for you? How was being principal? How'd your day as principal for a day go? Right? You know, hey, I taught a class on financial literacy. What did you teach? You know, as opposed to thinking, oh, where's my list of icebreaker questions? What do you do for a living? Right? Like that just feels weird. So think about why you made the choice to be in that room with those people. And questions like, well, I'm here because I'm curious. Oh, this is my first time here. Have you been here before? Like that's contextual to why, you know, that situation you're in, that conversation you can have for someone else. But don't pull out and think there's, you know, icebreakers or conversation starters for any scenario. That always leads to awkwardness.
That's a really good point. And actually, at the event I attended today, that was the question that everyone used. Oh, what school did you teach at today? Or what school were you principal at? And so we all had the same question. So it was really, that's really funny. All right. So the next question that I have, someone's asking, when should they follow up or how often should they follow up with someone that they're adding to their network?
They're going to hate this answer. Depends. And I'm not talking about the, you know, the incontinence pants. Depends. So first of all, always, you know, you say someone does meet you, like does a, you know, an informational interview, or you met them today, right? At let's take your example, Angel, of these other principals for a day, and you met someone. You know what? firing off a note in 24 48 hours or 72 hours that says it was really terrific chatting with you, and learning more about your experiences as principal for a day. And I'm excited to hear that there's somebody else who cares about financial literacy, right? Like, that's just sort of like a nice, polite thing to do, right? Like that follow up. Or if someone gave you an informational interview, thank you so much for the informational and, the conversation and the time today. Appreciated the insights and, the ideas you gave me. I'm going to act on them. Then this is where, kind of finding the right time. If there's not an immediate ask, this is where thinking about the conversation you had with the person or the advice that they gave you and implementing it, and then being able to circle back at that point in time, right? So this is where I would also say that sort of good, sleuthing around the internet. This is not the not creepy sleuthing on the internet. This is the good sleuthing on the internet. This is where you could follow someone on LinkedIn if you're not connected to them. This is where you could do a Google alert on them or their company or their brand. And when you see something, you can reach out to them and follow up. If they said to you, follow up with me, hey, this is great chatting with you, but you know what? There might be some job openings at my company, follow up with me after Thanksgiving. Well, make a note to follow up with them after Thanksgiving. That's the snooze feature on Gmail is a handy one to do that. So your follow up kind of depends. And just, for the person asking the question and everybody else, please know that, when you write a book on networking, as I like to say, as the daughter of a veterinarian, I have to eat my own dog food. Like, I have to follow my own advice, and I do follow my own advice. So I've had situations where I've had to think about the follow-up. I've had to think about ways of following up with people that doesn't have a hard ask, but I just need them to keep me top of mind. I've had to do all of those things. And there's a lot more of that advice in terms of making a career change and stuff that I've got in my book. But depends is the short answer on the follow-up. But just make sure you do it.
Oh man, I'm over here cracking up laughing. So now I want to segue. This is already a question that I asked you on the podcast, but I think this is like, it goes hand in hand with this previous question where someone's asking, when should they follow up? Tell us the number one networking mistake.
Failure to follow up.
Right.
Absolutely. And because you know what, this is where you could, by following up, this is where you can turn sort of a one-off mentorship meeting or a one-off, conversation. This is where you can make someone one of your raving fans and champions. So the follow-up for me is not, hey, thanks very much for giving me the time, or thanks for, directing me to those resources. Follow-up after that could be, oh, hey, you recommended these resources. I took a look at these ones. These were amazing, super helpful. By the way, I also found this. Here's the link. You might find it useful as well. Finding and mastering that art of the follow-up, where you're now being of service and helpful to somebody else, or if someone makes an introduction for you, let them know what happens. Hey, thanks for that introduction. I'm meeting with, Joanne next Tuesday. I'll let you know how it goes. Or, hey, you made that introduction and I followed up with Joanne twice and I haven't heard from her. Do you have any recommendations? That kind of keeping in touch and that kind of follow-up, that really helps solidify and make that first relationship stronger. So, part of the follow-up is, yes, you might be following up to saying, hey, have you made a decision on a supplier or a vendor or, that new hire? But there's also this art of the follow-up that can turn, as I said, someone who you have, an acquaintance or casual relationship with, or maybe it's someone you'd like to have as a mentor, but they've only agreed to meet with you once. The follow-up with them can turn them into those raving fans.
Right. And I know it's such a simple but profound statement at the same time, whereas most people don't think about it. And the feedback that I received when you were on the podcast where people were saying, that's really important to follow up. And I know you and I had this conversation as well on the podcast of how many business cards I would find myself having. I have a shoebox of them over here. And I remember a few years ago going through the shoebox and I was like, you know what? I've never followed up with a lot of these people. And I started to follow up literally 2 years later they were cards from conferences. And I was like, oh my gosh, I dropped the ball. And I know so many other people, who are going to come back and watch this replay are probably going to say the same thing. It's like they're going to think about that one person they met and they never followed up with, or maybe they've had that one or two conversations or the cup of coffee. I always say, if you don't ask for something, the answer will always be no. If you never reach out.
Right, but also too, like think about someone you meet at a conference to follow up on an email because you've got their business card and say, "Hey, it was terrific meeting with you. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope our paths, continue to cross in the future. And maybe there'll be opportunities, but regardless, that it was terrific meeting you." And
Right.
then to jump over to LinkedIn and say, I want to make sure that we're connected here.
Right.
Part of your follow up. When you think about those relationships that way is, are you active, on LinkedIn? Is your profile up to date? Are you posting? Are you commenting and interacting with the posts of other people? Because that should be part of your strategy, because that's kind of follow up as well, right? Because part of our reason for following up is being seen as interested, seeing as being engaged, seeing that we're worthy of somebody's trust and reputation. So, consider that kind of interaction. I mean, come on, interacting on LinkedIn is kind of like interacting at a conference. So, just continue the conversation over there and see where it leads.
Awesome. Right. That's such great words. And Kelly, I know we're coming up on 1 hour, actually 47 minutes. We still got a little bit of time, but
I got time for you. I got time for you and your network.
I love the conversations. And I just been following ever since the podcast, everything you say. I'm like, this is like hitting the nail on the head. This is like Kelly's in my head. The same conversations I'm having with everyone. I actually suggested to someone they should be watching tonight, so I hope they are, because I wanted to get some really good tips on networking. And hopefully, when with this world that we're in, I'm hoping that everyone has really become accustomed to the digital way of networking and maybe stop relying so much on that face to face and utilizing their LinkedIn and their social media and making sure they're just reaching out. And I want to give some tips to people who are listening or watching and going to come back and watch. I want to give my tip first, and then maybe you can give yours on staying connected. So, and I mentioned this to you previously, one of the tricks that I do, I have a reminder in my phone. And on Sundays, I go through all of my contacts and I'm like, when was the last time I spoke to this person or this person? And from time to time, I also go through the list on LinkedIn and emails. And I literally found 7, 8 people last month. And I was like, okay, it's been quite some time since we've chatted. I need to reach out, schedule some time. So many people, they don't even want to do the phone call or the Zoom. They're like, let's just meet for lunch. but you have to remind people, hi, I'm here, I exist.
Well, I mean, we all have messy, before the pandemic, we all have messy, complicated lives.
Mm-hmm.
And you could be feeling really guilty that you haven't stayed in touch with these people or you haven't seen them. But my guess is they haven't been hammering down your door or, texting you incessantly saying, right? So sometimes it's just like lovely when somebody else just, throws that, little note, throws that, hey, we haven't seen each other in a while. And the other person's like, thank you. You're absolutely right. Let's do something about it. So, don't feel badly. This is where, go back to the part of the conversation we had earlier, Angel, when I said, think about how you show up every day for people. So as long as you haven't been a jerk, I think that lapse of time to having not seen people in your network, I think it's okay, because our lives get complicated and distracted and overwhelming. And that was before March of 2020. So cut yourself some slack on that. I love this idea of doing this, kind of every Sunday, like when you do a to-do list. I used to always have a recurring, item on my to-do list was like, all right, think of someone in my network and reach out. One of the things, Melissa Moore, she's a retail advisor based in Ireland who I've met through the pandemic. And one of the things she does is on a day when she hasn't posted an article or, sort of a major update on LinkedIn, she's really realized that LinkedIn is where her audience is for her business. She spends 20 minutes there every single day. And what she does is goes and looks at goes through her sort of the active posts, right, that she sees in her stream, and she engages actively for 20 minutes with other people's content. And I thought, that's a terrific strategy, right? She might search some hashtags to find some things, but otherwise she's like, all right, what's showing up in my stream? What is this? Let me read this article. Let me read this post that they've done. Let me have a conversation with them on LinkedIn around this and amplify somebody else's post. And that strategy for her is paying off in dividends because as I said, she's really realized the audience she needs to refer her work and new business is there on LinkedIn, and this strategy is paying off in spades for her.
Those are really good points. Kelly, I have one question before we let you go here. So I want to target this question towards business owners because so many people are in the phase of either starting a business or even just have the idea of what they want to do, especially with the pandemic that's happened since last year. People are now realizing they need some sort of backup source of income or additional source of income. And let's say if you're out networking and potential business owner, you're meeting someone and they're thinking, oh my gosh, this person would come in so handy, but not right now, maybe 6 months to 1 year down the road. How can you stay engaged with a networking contact when you're not ready to come in with the ask, or you don't have really anything to offer aside from, hi, how are you?
Well, I mean, it may be that this other person could be a great mentor, as you launch your business. Maybe this person is someone that you want to say, wow, I can envision down the road, you're going to be someone I'm going to want to talk to about, pitching my service or, seeing if you could use, my product. But given that you are really experienced in this field, as I'm going to say, as I set up my business, I could really value your insights, as, a mentor or, as someone who I could brainstorm with or bounce some ideas off. And if I've got some questions over the course of this next period of time, would it be all right with you if I asked you, right? Like there's all sorts of things that you could do rather than just all of a sudden showing up when you think everything is in order. I mean, this is one of the mistakes startups make when they think about pitching venture capitalists. They want to show up with a pitch deck rather than showing up over a period of time and building a relationship and showing that there's someone who, when all other factors are, uncertain, the only certainty is who you are as a human being, rather than building that relationship. So a venture capitalist would say, I can put my trust in you because I like to see the way you operate. So think about other ways, or, you could look and see with this person, you could say, oh, look, they're involved in this professional organization. I should ask them about that. Like, let me check out the organization and then let me ask this person some specific questions about how they found it valuable, what things are useful. So I think there's other things, you can do rather than just sort of saying, all right, I've got this golden ticket, but I'm not going to, lay it on the table for a year. Search them out, look at their profile, ask some good questions, watch and observe what they're interested in, and you'll find some ways to reach out.
Awesome. So here's the thing. Let me ask this. This is almost like a piggyback question. So, do you feel as though the person who is, has this idea and they want to get started and they're just trying to add people to their network who they can leverage in the future, if they keep coming in with like various questions, let me rephrase it. So, let's say person B that they're syncing with is maybe a business coach or a business consultant, or they provide services in which maybe they help entrepreneurs. Do you feel as though person A who's networking for the future conversation, if they keep coming in and they're asking, how do I do this or how do I do that, or what is your advice? Do you feel like that's sort of stealing coaching time or one-on-one strategy? Or some people will say, well, let me pick your brain, and I really hate that question.
Oh my God, no, good, yeah. No. First of all, never ask to pick someone's brain. As my friend Adrienne Graham in the title of her book, no, you can't pick my brain. It costs too much. This is where, you got to do your homework first. And then you can go in and ask a better question. As someone said to me once, Angel, in a call, it was on a Zoom, so I had to do my best poker face. She said, I know I can read about you and your career on the internet, but why don't you tell me about yourself? And all I can think of is this Zoom is ending really quick, because if you don't have the courtesy of spending just a little bit of time doing that work so that you could actually come and ask me a better question. So, hey, Kelly, tell me about your career, right? Or in the example you gave, hey, how'd you get into the coaching business? Well, first of all, you should have read the person's website. You should have Googled their name to see if they had any interviews. Because guess what? Maybe they were in a podcast and they talked about how they got into the coaching business. Maybe they have their own podcast that talks about getting into the coaching business. Do all of that work first so that you can reach out and say, I found that interview really interesting, and I've taken a look at these other things. Here's what I still don't understand. You mentioned this. I'd really love to know how that actually happened. Now, the other person now says, wow, you've invested some time in looking into this. You are now displaying attributes of someone I want to invest time in. And then go do it. But if you're sort of just showing up and hoping someone else is going to just lay it out for you on a silver platter,
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I get asked that question so often, and I'm like, no, it's called a strategy session. I need to book a consultation.
No, but also too, one of the things I have really found too is when people say, hey, can I pick your brain on this? What I respond now with, I think the question you're asking me is this, and here's where you'll find your answers.
Okay.
And often enough, I find that there are people who are just seeking answers, and they just haven't had the example of the right way to ask. Somebody else has just said to them, hey, just reach out and ask them if you can grab a cup of coffee for 15 minutes and pick their brain. Everyone will do that. Like, I've actually sat on stage at an event where someone said, oh, the networking advice I give to everyone is just reach out and tell them you want to brainstorm with them for 15 minutes over coffee. Yes, my hair like combusted, on stage. But so rather, I look at those questions now and say, I think what you're asking me is this, and here's where you'll find answers on my blog. Or there's a couple of episodes of my podcast, in your case, that you could say, hey, here's where the answers are. Take a listen. And if you got questions after that, be sure to circle back. But sometimes I just find people are looking for an answer, so I direct them to the answer that way.
Awesome. And so I want to just say it's last chance for Q&A if anyone new has joined or popped on. I know some people have been popping in and out, but I personally have one last question for you, Kelly. I said this like 5 minutes ago. But okay, what do you think about the people who, they build their network and they have all of these contacts in their network solely for the purpose of constantly asking for favors? I I found I have someone like that in my network, and this person only reaches out when they need something. And when I think about it, I sat and pondered one day and I said, I've never asked this person for anything, yet they constantly call and ask for favors. And it's always something that's benefiting them. How do we deal with people like that? Or what do you think about people who are using that sort of strategy of building their network to get something? Or is that a part of networking?
Yeah. That if that person is watching right now, I want you to know that you should just stop that behavior and stop it right now. Right? That's you that things have to be reciprocal. I have no problem when there are times in people's lives that they need a lot. And this is where the saying thank you and the following up, that's your give back. It's when people just keep asking and they never say thank you, or they never say, you know what, that introduction you made or that advice you gave, this is what I did with it. That's when I'm like, we're done. We're absolutely done. I think in the situation, might be one of those times that the next time they ask, the answer is no, or you seem to be very urgent on this, and this doesn't work in my timeline. And see what they end up doing. Right? Some of this may be like, hey, let's just test and see if they have any self-awareness. Otherwise, I think the next time they email or and ask for something, say, we really need to have a talk on this. I find that there's a lot of you asking for things, which I'm usually happy, usually feel good about, but I'd feel a lot better about it if I thought you appreciated it, because it's not evident, and because I'm not hearing any sort of acknowledgement of what I am doing for you and helping you out on this. It's getting exhausting. Right? Like the little boy who cried wolf. Like I might start turning a deaf ear. So, like I said, I think it's understanding that. And I have someone in my network who does that. They show up about once every 7 years. I've determined. I think the last time they showed up, I gave a, hey, I'm really excited that you're doing that. And I ignored the big part in their all about me email. I ignored the ask, and maybe that is going to put an end to it.
Yeah, well, in my case, this person shows up about every 6 weeks, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
so
I think that might be worth having that conversation, saying, yeah, listen, you may not be aware, but I've noticed this pattern. And other people may not be, I want to say, as forgiving as I am. And I just want to let you know how experiencing this behavior, how it makes me feel.
Right. But Kelly, so the last time that this happened, and this person, they didn't call, they text, I didn't reply.
Yeah, yes, sometimes putting our head in the sand is the right. And maybe if the next time they show up, you can say, I think you should call me, and I'll explain why I didn't respond the last time you did this, because you may not be aware of how your behavior is coming across to other people.
Yeah, that will be quite the conversation. So hopefully they'll get a chance to watch this and they'll catch on.
But I mean, what's the worst that can happen?
Right. That's a good point.
What's the worst that can happen? They may say, well, you don't get me and you're not being helpful. And you're like, good, I don't have to worry about these emails and asks anymore. I'm saving myself some energy, right? Or they could be like, oh my God, I had no idea that I was doing this all wrong. I am so sorry. And then, you've course corrected for them. And then the next time they show up, you're actually looking forward to it.
Okay.
And particularly if it's someone that's younger in your network, because that's what I found, like younger people. And I actually have a blog post on this because a mentor said this to me, Kelly, I'm this younger person. And I'm like, they have no clue. This is where their next ask, I would say, we need to talk before I respond to this, because I need you to understand how your behavior is coming across to someone like me.
Right. So thank you so much for those tips. This will make a great conversation.
If you need me to be like the facilitator, like, like
We're gonna
judge, if you need me, your own Judge Judy, your own Judge Judy.
bring them right here on live stream and let's discuss this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's already, yeah, I could just put on a little lace collar. I could be like the networking Judge Judy and tell people when they've got it wrong. I'm sorry, Angel's right on this one.
Well, Kelly, I know we're at time. We're actually over time, and I can go on and on with conversations with you. But for people who have tuned in and who'll come on and watch the replay, do you have sort of any last words of advice on building and leveraging their network?
Show up for your network every day so it's there for you.
I like that. Man, you have some good ones.
There it is.
Right.
I'm happy to come back anytime and have these conversations with you. This has been a terrific amount of fun. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks everyone who's tuned in and who'll come on and watch the replay. If you have questions, make sure that you reach out to Kelly. So her website is there scrolling at the bottom of the screen. And definitely check out her book as well, which is on Amazon, which is Build Your Dream Network. It's such a long title, but I'll read it all. Build Your Dream Network, Forging Powerful Relationships in a Hyper-Connected World. And check out her podcast, Build Your Dream Network Podcast. So great conversations there around networking. And if you haven't already tuned in, make sure you follow her on social media, because I've been following and I've tuned in and I'm loving all the content. So
oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And yeah, follow along. There'll be some new content come January when the book turns 5.
Awesome. Congratulations again, Kelly. And thank you so much. And we will see you next time.